Hey, everybody, I want to say thank you for joining us today on Real Talk with Pastor Ben Graham. I'm excited about today's episode, and I'm really looking forward to the guests we have today. But I want to say thank you to our sponsors for sponsoring this episode. Man, we couldn't do it without you, so thank you for that. And for you that are watching, man, go check out our sponsors' websites and to support them. It's because of them we're able to do this show, and so I want to say thank you to them. Also, want to encourage you to go to our website, pastorbengraham.com. And you can find out our latest schedule. You can find out about our latest films. You can watch our episodes on there and to see what's happening in our world. So I want to encourage you to go to pastorbengraham.com. I'm excited today to have a pastor, sports enthusiast, just an all-around talented guy. This guy writes music. He sings. He was a pastor for a number of years. And for 20 plus years, he's had a show called the Spiritual Outdoor Network and channel, and just a awesome guy, good friend. And I'm looking forward to talking to him about hunting, fishing, and a whole lot more. We're glad to have Jimmy Seitz with us today, so stick around. We're going to hear from Dr. Jimmy in just a few moments, and looking forward to this episode. We are so glad to have Jimmy Seitz with us. Jimmy, thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's a joy to see you, Ben. Always good to be around you.
You know, it's amazing. We have a lot of things in common in terms of our interest. Of course, obviously, we're blessed with wonderful wives. We've got good wives. We've got good children.
Yep.
Love the Lord, and we have ministry background, and then love hunting. And of course, probably most of the time we're going to talk about hunting. But I want to go back to when you first started, when you was a kid, where you grew up, and kind of what your ambitions were as a kid.
Oh man, it's funny because I often joke that I came out of my mom's womb with a bow in one hand and a Bible in the other, or maybe a fishing rod in one hand and a Bible in the other. I really grew up on both. The Lord. My dad was a brand new Christian. My mother had converted him, and he wanted to go all out, so he became a preacher early on as he was in the military, and yet he loved bird hunting and he loved fishing, and my mother loved fishing. She's the best fisherman in the family, and so I literally cut my teeth. Some people get those little things from the store that you put in the freezer, and I'm cutting my teeth on like the handle of a fishing rod, man. So I was always in the outdoors. I remember my dad when I was 4 years of age, took me bird hunting on several occasions, quail hunting in Arkansas. We had a lot of dogs, and he would put me on his shoulders and carry me with I had little red Razorback cowboy boots on. They were so cold in the wintertime. and he'd carry me, and when the dogs pointed, he'd sit me down and say, "Now, son, don't move." And he'd go shoot the birds on the covey rise, come and get me, and we'd go after the singles. And then I started getting to carry a BB gun. And of course, I killed every quail that fell with my BB gun. You know that, right? And I claimed them anyway. But I'll never forget the day that I think I was 10, and I had a single shot 20 gauge that he let me carry open, not loaded. And the dog pointed a single, and he said, "Okay, this one's yours." And so I put a shell in there, and I walked up there, and he was behind me, and the bird got up, and I shot, and it fell. And I looked around real quick to see if my dad had shot it, and he didn't even have his gun up. And he said, "Congratulations, boy, you killed your first quail." And of course, my head got so big, I was like, "Oh, I'm a great hunter." And it's just those kind of moments like that you never forget. It's like your pegs, as you're climbing in life, the ladder of experience, so to speak. And you just don't forget those peg moments, is what I call them. And to be with my dad at that time, and boy, we spent our lifetime, hunting and fishing together. Kept me out of a lot of trouble when I got in my high school years, because I'd fish Friday night tournaments with him. So just loved it. And my mom too, spending time with her, my sister. We'd go on vacation. We never, ever in my life went, as I was growing up, went to Disney World or any place like that. We went to Lake DeGray, or we went to the Little Red River. We'd camp out 2 weeks, and we fished and skied, and it's just what we did, and we loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that is so much of what put that out love for the outdoors, in you. And I kind of grew up, and because I grew up in Arkansas, down in Benton. We moved there when I was 8, and so that's where I learned to hunt and fish. And probably because I was the oldest at that time, I was the oldest of when we first got to Arkansas, I was the oldest of 5 kids, and then my parents ended up having 3 more kids there, so I ended up being the oldest of 8. But we maybe because it was not that expensive for everybody to have a fishing pole and go catch fish,
That's
and then
right.
we could eat them or whatever,
Yeah.
And so we did a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing. And I remember too that first time I got my deer, and I probably shouldn't confess this, but it was the last day of doe season. And of course, in Arkansas at that time, you could kill more than one doe
Yeah.
in a day.
Yeah.
And it was the last day. I hadn't killed anything, and I had like 18 deer just come running up. I was in this big stand, like in the middle of a field, big tower stand, and I hear a bunch of deer run up, and they came up so much it kind of scared me at first, and then they took off up this trail, and I'm like, what in the world? And then I hear them coming back, so I get ready. And I may have shot a couple doe that day, and my dad later he come over to the stand. He said, "What is going on?" It's like World War II over here. And I said, "Well, Dad, there was a
Yep.
lot of deer. I shot a couple of them." And he said, "What in the world?" And I said, "Well, it's the last day. Nobody else had shot, so I figured let's get some meat, you know." So
That's right, man.
anyhow, so
I
we got
shot
a
my
couple of
first doe
deer.
7 times with a shotgun. I unloaded my pump and grabbed my dad's double barrel before he could stop me. And she was dead after the first shot, just about. So, I mean, it's like I totally mincemeated her. But man, I was pumped. I got me a deer, you know. So,
Well, and that's it. I started hunting on shotguns, and
yeah.
you know, it's funny growing up that way. But so obviously you love the outdoors, but you talked about how you love the Lord, and tell me
Yeah.
a little bit about your you know, your coming to Christ, and really maybe where you really felt like God was going to put you into ministry,
Yeah.
because and we're going to lead to it in a minute, but you know, first you started out in probably I think more of a traditional style ministry,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and but ultimately God led you to a different kind of ministry, unique ministry, which
Yep.
you know the Lord has certainly done that in my life as well. And it's funny is when I came to Nashville, I didn't know anything but just normal ministry, and didn't really, I don't know that I consciously had in my mind that I was going to maybe someday do what I'm doing now. But talk about just going into ministry.
Okay. It was really easy for me because, you know, there are a lot of different types of testimonies, but if you wanted to be kind of generic, there's those who grow up not as Christians, not churchy or anything like that, not with a religious family, and they bust hell wide open. And at some point, man, something happens, and they hit rock bottom, and wow, what an amazing salvation as they come out of drug addiction or whatever it is. And those people have a really amazing transformation, and they can tell you this is when my conversion happened. For me, I was a church kid, and so you know, by the time I was a baby, I was going to church every single time the doors were opened. And with my dad being the preacher, the new preacher of this little country church, you know, he did everything. He was his own secretary. We did the bulletin on an old mimeograph machine that you go doom, 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 like that, and fold them
I
all
remember
and,
that.
you know, go mail them. I mean, I helped do that. So I kind of joke that I grew up on the front pew, and I bathed in the baptistry and ate communion bread for a living. I mean, for my meals, you know. It's kind of funny because that's how much time I spent at the church. So my conversion is totally different. I've known Jesus since I was first spoken to. And so he was never a new answer for me. He was the answer from the time that I was born. And so I was kind of yanked up in the church, so to speak, because I did get yanked around every once in a while, like, you quit messing up or I'm gonna make you come up here and sit by me, mama, kind of in the middle of church, you know. So I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I loved listening to my dad preach. He was just such a real man in the way that he would share his faith, and he was very learned, and he was very he was self-taught. And you know, he's been dead 7 years this July, and they still play his radio show every day in Arkansas. It's just
Wow.
amazing the influence he ended up having on people and the kind of preacher he became. So I loved that. And I also loved going with him on his gospel meetings. And if I made good grades in school, he would take me out on Thursdays and Fridays and let me go. Now, just between me and you, I really went for two reasons. Number one is there were always members that would have us over to eat. And a lot of these are country churches. Well, these people have ponds. So I'd be fishing. I'd be I'd be
Yeah.
hammering those ponds. They'd be working on sermons or visiting people all day. I'm fishing. They'd come get me in time to clean up for church. That was one thing. And then when I got a little older, so I could meet girls at that church. So you know, two great motivations, right? But I got to hang out with
Yeah.
my dad. But backing that up, when I was 4, back when my dad would take me bird hunting, you can tell what kind of father he was. He began to take me to church early, and he'd say, "Son, I'm gonna put you behind the pulpit. I'm gonna set you on this old milk crate or this coke crate, and preach a sermon." And I had a little sermon that he'd helped me write on the Good Samaritan, and I had one on the temple. And he and mom and my sister would sit on the front pew, and they'd listen to me preach my little sermon. And they did this every Sunday. And then he'd say, okay, you need to learn how to serve communion. I spilled it the first time on the white carpet. That was not good. And then after that, I'd serve communion to them. Well, then some other families at that little church began to find out what I was doing. They would come, and before you know it, by the time I'm about 5 or 6, there's 30 people there, and I've got 5 or 6 sermons now, and I'm repeating them every month and a half. But I did that my whole growing up years, and my dad started what he called a Timothy class, and he was training other young men and girls to do various things. And he had a class for us boys to learn how to preach. So I really preached my whole life. And by the time I was 15, I was getting calls from Benton, the Highway Church in Benton, right there. They were in between ministers and called and said, hey, can you come preach for us for a few Sundays? Well, I ended up preaching 6 months on Sundays for them. So I had to write a new sermon every week while I was a 16-year-old boy going through, post-puberty crazy crap. And so there you go, man. That was my life. And my dad helped me write sermons, and I'm struggling, as any 16-year-old boy would do, to be a 16-year-old. And yet here I am, this young minister developing a reputation in the area. And after that 6 months was over, I get a call from Rose City over in North Little Rock, and they say, we need somebody. And I preached there 6 months. And then I'm in college at the age of 17. So a little church out in the middle of nowhere, Enola, it's alone backwards, they called and said, hey, we need a preacher. So I preached there for 4 years, 5 years when I was in college, because I went a 5th year. Every Sunday I drove to Enola and preached to about 50 to 60 people. And red wasp would come out of the ceiling and land on me. And, there's women sitting by the window going, spitting their snuff, and guys are getting up serving communion with Lucky Strikes in their t-shirt. It's just funny, man. But good people. And I got fed, I got paid $50 a Sunday, which was a fortune. And then a lot of times we'd get a chicken meal or come home with eggs and some pork chops for the refrigerator. And you know how it is. And so I really just always preached, always teaching the word of God from the time I was 4 years of age. And I had parents that intentionally raised me in that way. And my dad always planted the seed in my mind that, God's calling you now. You can be a preacher. We need more preachers. We don't need more doctors. We don't need more this or that. And we need preachers, And so he intentionally implanted that in my mind. And so I look back on it, and I can feel the call of God in the way he called my dad, who ended up, in the military 42 years, decorated by the president twice, and had a great career as a colonel. And yet he preached 52 years. And he called me through my dad and mom at the age of 4. And I've been preaching ever since. And I'm 62 now. So I've been preaching 58 years. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's my story. I just love preaching and teaching. So whether it's from a traditional pulpit, whether it's a magazine article or an interview or a podcast, or whether it's like I spoke at 3 wild game dinners last week in South Carolina, and we saw 37 people commit their life to the Lord for the first time, and literally hundreds that recommitted their lives through these wild game dinners, of all things.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter where I'm speaking or teaching or what it is, or a class or traditional, non-traditional setting. I just want to present God's word, and I love doing it in story form, because his singular strongest gift that he has allowed me to borrow and use is storytelling. And so that's what I do. And you have that same gift as well.
I love that. And it's amazing too, as we're talking, I don't know if you and I've ever really spent much time talking about this, but I grew up a little bit younger than you, but traveling many of the probably same roads there in Arkansas. We grew up.
Yeah.
Of course, I was going back to my dad told a story when he was a teenager at church one day. My grandfather was a pastor, and he was cutting up, and my grandfather said, move to the front. So he got up and went to the front row, and he said, no. I said, move to the front. He made him get on the platform and sit beside him while he was preaching. And of course, all his buddies back, every time my grandpa looked this way, they'd be laughing at him. And my grandpa caught it, and he said, oh, you boys are laughing too, but don't worry, I'm gonna let your parents know. So,
yeah,
I learned that as I heard that as a kid. I was like, all right, I'm gonna try to behave. But I grew up, and of course, for me, when you're a Graham, it's congratulations, it's a preacher. I mean, that's kind of, the running joke in our family. There's a lot of preachers, but my parents were just always like, we just want you to do what God wants. But God opened doors. We grew up, my brothers and I, we sang in the groups. We traveled all over Arkansas and other places, but we started when I was probably 12. And then God called me to preach when I was 14. I really felt the call. Now, I had preached some sermons before that, but that's when I really knew this is what I was supposed to do. And we traveled all over Arkansas, and just so many good memories. And I laugh because in all those churches we were in, there's funny stories, there was unique people, but there was just people who loved God, and I think a lot of that, was contagious and
Yeah.
just put a passion in me to love God. And one of the neat things is, and I didn't know it at the time, but I met a lot of people who they weren't pastors, but they were, whatever they did, they just believed that it was important that God was to be the premier of their life, and so whatever they did, they shared their faith. They weren't afraid of it,
Yeah.
and that was something we try to do as a pastor, was teach people to live your faith outside the church walls. Sunday's the pep rally to
Yep.
encourage one another, but we really, when we're truly doing ministries outside of there. And I want to come back to it in a minute. I want to talk about a message you preached at our church, but let's go back. So obviously, at some point, God allowed you to mirror ministry and your love for hunting together,
Yeah.
and I'd like to know more about that. And
Okay.
and I'm gonna say this now so I don't forget. I want to talk about how even you and I met, and it's so cool because I ended up finding out that you were instrumental in a couple different ministries getting started. Big Tent Revival. I don't know if that's what they were called then. And Dave Cristiano, and I want to come back to that. But just talk about
Yeah.
how God brought you into the ministry and the hunting, fishing, outdoor world together.
Okay. Starting out in ministry, I went to Harding University to play football. And after 2 seasons, I got hurt really bad, broke a collarbone in 7 pieces and a finger and a nose and all that. So I switched over to baseball and ended up playing baseball there. Well, because of that, I got an extra year. I had a 5th year to finish my eligibility. And it was during that time that we had this massive revival break out among the students at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. It was a small liberal arts Christian college with about 3,500 students at the time. And I had met Amanda, and she was a 17-year-old freshman, and I was a senior, 21-year-old senior. And so I wanted to stay another year, for her as well. And so I had double motivation. Well, that's when this revival broke out. And I happened to be on the campus ministry team. And there were about 20 of us, and we led this thing. And we were seeing 700 and 800 students coming out to what we call the Lily Pool and getting around it and worshiping. And man, I mean, things began to happen, and the fraternities and sororities began to have revival. And so I remember a professor that I admired greatly, Dr. Neil Pryor. He was chairman of the Bible department. He called me in his office one day, and he said, "Jimmy, have you ever considered being a Bible major?" And I said, "Well, I kind of considered it, but I feel like I really want to do a sports broadcasting, or maybe be a coach, and then I'm going to preach for a small church on the weekends that can't afford a minister." And he said, "Well, you would do good at either, but you can't do really super good at both." And I thought about that. And I thought, okay, so what is the more important thing for me? And this is not downgrading any coach or anything like that, but what would be the most important thing in my mind to do? And that would be to preach. And so I changed my major. And so it all came out that it all worked its way into this big move. And so I ended up with 36 extra hours of college.
Mm.
And then I found out that with a bachelor's of biblical communications, if you really want to teach, which I thought I wanted to do, that you have to have a doctorate degree if you're going to teach at a Christian college. And that was kind of my goal at that time. So I got into a graduate program and did my master's of divinity, which is a 90-hour master's degree. It's like 3 master's degrees. And man, it was a long time. You get to about year 4 and you see the tunnel coming at the light at the end of the tunnel, and it's still a train. You still got another year to go, but you finally get done. Well, then I found out you can't get into a doctorate program unless you get languages. So now you got to make sure that you're well versed in both Greek and Hebrew. Well, I could do Greek, but I had to take advanced Greek. So I did that, and then I had to learn Hebrew. So there's 2 more years. And finally, I got into a doctorate of ministry program and spent 5 years in that. So I ended up, all the while, you can't even do a doctorate of ministry if you're not working for a church. And so I'm working for a church through this whole education, 11 years past college. I'm working with the church and working on my education. I could have had 2 or 3 brain surgery doctorates by that point, but it's just the way it is in theology if you want to be a professor. So by the time I'm all done, I was a practitioner within churches as both a pulpit minister and a youth minister, that time split evenly.
Hey, I want to thank our sponsor, Cardio Miracle. And let me just tell you, I'm not just telling you about this product. It's a product that me and my family take. We love it. I love sharing it with other people. I love sharing it to my doctor friends who take a look and they say, oh, this looks okay. And then they look at the ingredients, they're like, wow, this is impressive. Then they try it, and not only do they love it, but they're subscribing it and encouraging their patients to take it. I'm telling you got to try Cardio Miracle. Go to their website, check out the link. You'll not regret it. Cardio Miracle.
And it was during that time that I got my first TV show, Campaign America. And it was a God thing. It's the only way I can explain it. It was just a God thing. It came out of left field, and somebody said, hey, they're looking for a host. You should send in some of your little videos you do for your youth group. So I did. Well, I ended up winning that job, so to speak. And I did Campaign America. It's kind of like an old Donahue show, but it was Christian valued. And we were on Fox and we were on other places. And we did 100 episodes of those. Some were roving and going to syndicate studios like NBC Nashville or wherever it was. I think we were at Fox Nashville on the night that President Clinton announced that he was going to allow gay people into the military. So that was a huge announcement in 1992 or thereabouts. And we were here in Nashville, Tennessee to do our Campaign America 1 hour live special in the Fox studio that night. And so as a result of that, I called my producer and I said, are you watching the news right now? And he said, no. I said, turn it on. And so he changed one of our 15-minute talk segments and called the panelists and said, hey, we're going to talk about this. So we did. And I know that subject is it's a volatile subject. So I'm not bringing it up for that reason. I'm just simply telling a historical event. We talked about that night homosexuality and what the Bible says about it, and I made it very clear after my panelists went. I said, look, if you are someone who struggles with homosexuality, please understand we love you. We're not against you. We do not think of ourselves as better than you. We all have something that we struggle with, and if that's what you're struggling with, we would love to help you. Please give us a call, because while we love you, we don't love the sin that the Bible talks about regarding, homosexuality or adultery or whatever it is. We don't condone that sin, but we love you and we want to help you. Well, the phone lines went crazy, and we had hired this company in Chicago with 200 operators to handle all of our calls, because we were getting a lot of calls. And there were so many calls came in that it jammed the switchboard. Somehow it affected, like, I think it was J.C. Penney's and somebody else in Nashville, and knocked their lines out for like 18 hours. So there was a lawsuit.
Wow.
But it was the highest rated live show in the history of television up to that point in the Nashville market. And we had, I think it was 2,000 requests for Bible study. And that was the night that we found out that a country singer named Randy Travis had called in and was seeking someone to come and study with him. We also found out that when it aired, a different one of those aired somewhere up in Michigan or somewhere, there was a prison. A chaplain called and said, we have one of our prisoners that would like to have a preacher come and talk with him. And it was, of all people, Jeffrey Dahmer. And he ended up being saved before he was executed. So those are some of the things that were happening in those early days. And so I got the bug for television at that point. So while I was doing that show, I was a youth minister, but I ended up moving after my degree to become the preacher in Madison of a very large church. It's about 5,200 members. And there was a television show. I moved there for that reason. It was called Amazing Grace Bible Class. And so I did another 100 episodes where I wrote the script, delivered the lesson, and helped I didn't produce it, but I helped out. And that's when I learned how to do interviews. And it was more of a magazine show. After I taught for 14 minutes, the other half was magazine. So we interviewed a lot of people, Johnny Erickson Tata and Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, and just pro football players. And so I'm learning all about, teaching on television, interviewing people, what it takes to get good ratings and make it more interesting. And all the while, God is formulating something that I didn't realize he was doing. He was going to move me out of the pulpit, out of traditional ministry, into what I had been doing for 22 years that would have by far the biggest platform, the biggest influence of anything that I couldn't even believe would exist. So that's currently, where I'm at 22 years later after that. So.
Wow. And that's
sorry about the long
amazing
answer,
too.
but it's not an easy, short answer.
I'm glad, because I didn't know all that. That's amazing. I remember us talking about one time a little bit of a show, but that's awesome. I love hearing that. So One day, I think it was probably 9 years ago. We
Yep.
was at I think it was at the Turkey Wildlife.
National Wild
Uh,
Turkey Federation.
yeah, that's it. And
Yep.
I had just been told the story about. No, no, actually, you told me. We start talking, and I was telling you we doing some film stuff, getting into some movies and stuff. And at that time, we had done a couple projects, just kind of really getting going. But I had been able to act a little bit in some stuff and help
Yep.
produce some stuff. And I mentioned we have some filmmakers in our church, and you said, "Who are they?" And I mentioned Dave Cristiano, and you said Dave and Rich, and I was like, "Yeah." And then you told me the
Yeah.
story about, I think it was the first movie they did. They
Yep.
premiered it with your
I
youth
think it's
group
called The
in
Twilight
Arkansas.
Zone or something like that, or Daylight Zone. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
The
something
Daylight
like
Zone.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then one day I was down in Franklin at the theater and doing this event. And they had like all these old school groups there, old
Hmm.
Christian groups. And so Big Tent
Yep.
Revival's there. And we get to talking. And I don't know how it came up, but I guess they came and sang that night that film was premiered or something like that.
Yep.
And you'd have to
Big Tent
remind me,
Revival.
what's the lead singer's name? I know he's in Memphis now. I don't even remember. But he was telling me, he was like, "Yeah, we sang, and then they played that film that night." And I'm like, "What in the world?" And so
Yeah.
you just had all kinds of people in. It must have been a great
It
youth
was
night.
crazy times, man. That was all started in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And from there, one of those guys from Big Tent got involved with Compassion International, and
Yeah.
he also went to Harding University. So I mean, we had all these connections that were coming along. But God was doing some things there with some young guys and young girls,
So
and He had a
Spencer
big plan.
Smith is the guy you're
Yeah, it was
talking about,
Spence.
the drummer.
Spence Smith. Yes.
It's funny.
Yeah.
We meet them I see them all in Franklin, and about 2 months later, I'm in El Salvador on a trip with Compassion,
Yep.
and we're there, and I hear somebody say, "Hey," and I looked over, and it was Spence, and
Yep.
that's
Good
when
old
I found out.
Spence.
I didn't know he was working with Compassion,
That's right.
but that was really neat. And he had
He
told me that
actually
he grew up
handled me
there.
as a speaker for several years,
Wow, oh,
after
that's
Big
great.
Tent. Yeah. A great guy. And we went to the same college.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's he kind of told me a little bit about his upbringing and growing up there. So
Yep.
now, obviously, we haven't got into your show now. Tell us about how that got started, because that
Okay.
really ultimately is like, to me. And I'll set it up with this. My brother calls me, my brother Brian, who's just a year younger than me, year and 2 months, and he goes, "I used you in a sermon illustration." I thought, "Oh, great! What did what story did you tell?" And he was doing a graduation ceremony. He said, "I talked about how as a kid you want to be a police officer, then you wanted to play in the NBA, and then you want to be an
Mhm.
actor, and then you want to be president, and all these things." As I said I was going to do. When I was 17, I went to DC on this leadership training there was 100 kids picked out, two from each state, and I was one of the ones picked out from Arkansas. And I found out you had to be 35 to be president. So I did the math. 2016 would be the first time I could run for president. So I'm signing these Congress book, Dr. Ben Graham, President 2016, and I get him writing back, "Hey, Dr. Graham, you got my vote." Well, he's telling the story, and he said, "But God called him to ministry, and that's what he did. And I had some opportunities to do other things, but I stuck with what God called me to do." He said, "But God allowed him to become a reserve officer and a chaplain. He went to the police academy and did that,
Mhm.
and then God allowed him to be in movies. And then I had a friend that played for the NBA for the Lakers, and so I got to warm up with Shaq and Kobe and get to go out on NBA
There you go.
courts and stuff. And then in 2016, I got asked to be a part of the faith team at the White House and got to go for about 2.5 years, almost every week to the White House. And so he's just sharing
Wow.
this. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Well, it was like 2 weeks later, 3 in the morning, I wake up in the middle of the night. I'm like, "Oh man, God has given me the desires of my heart. He really
Mhm.
has." And, the Bible says we'll delight ourselves in the Lord who gives the desires of our heart. But I never really thought, "Hey, if I do what God wants, maybe someday I'll get to do this." I had no clue. And God brought us to Nashville. And most of this, now the policing and the NBA thing happened before there, but most of really like the film stuff happened after coming here.
Yeah.
And I feel like God has also done that in your life. He's giving the desires of your heart, maybe without even
Yeah.
really fully knowing what all God was doing. But talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, he really has, because I loved my youth ministry when I was in Dallas Fort Worth area. I was there 5 years, had a great youth group, and I was working on my doctorate, and they also let me preach on Sunday nights a good bit, so I was still cutting my teeth there. And it was during that time I got Campaign America, so there's a whole lot going on there. And I got to the point where I was needing to do my doctoral dissertation. And so I moved to Arkansas and lived in a cabin for 3 years while I worked on it, and was doing some speaking, living off the land, and I just realized just how much, and I already knew it, but it really solidified how much I love the outdoors. And I was thinking about, how do I do ministry on this? Well, one day I'm in a deer stand, and it's very cold. It was 7 degrees, and it was back when I just had a pair of cheap coveralls, and man, I was freezing. And I went to stand up, and my coveralls had frozen to this old metal tractor seat. That's probably one reason I was freezing, sitting on a metal tractor seat. But they had frozen to it and stuck and ripped. And I'm like, what am I doing out here? Well, about that time, uh, it was like a download from heaven. I'm not going to say it was filled with some kind of bright light, some big voice. It wasn't. It was just, I just felt it. And I think that's how the Holy Spirit works personally. But I just, man, boom, there it was. I just got this download, and God revealed to me, you need to do some type of outdoor television that, show, now that you've cut your teeth on Campaign America and you've learned about it, take this platform, and that's how you're going to get into the home of individuals. You don't need to keep preaching to people who are already saved. You got 99 sheep in the pen. They're good. Go get the one that's lost. And here's how you do it. You want to get in their homes. It's hard to knock on doors and have somebody invite you and let them, talk about the Bible now. So here's how you get in on their TV. Well, I had the idea, I played with the idea, and at that point, I had never even met Michael W. Smith. It was hilarious. I loved his music, went to his concert one time or two, and but I'd never even met him, didn't know that I ever would. And I remember somewhere around 1995, 96, I'm out in Texas speaking at a youth rally, and I'm fly fishing for bass in this tank out in the oil country. And I had a guy with a tiny little camera. I said, "Hey, turn that thing on me." And and I said, "Hey, this is Jimmy Sites with Outdoor Adventures for God," or something like that. And I said, if you want to catch a good old fish on the fly, just listen to what old Michael W. Smith says. Hey, Smitty, check this out. Go west, young man. Caught a 2 pound bass. I was dying laughing. So I actually have this video. I need to find it. It's somewhere on one of those little bitty tapes. But I'm actually talking, for whatever reason, I don't know why I did it, to Michael W. Smith, like he was there. And and I was practicing, and then I started doing that more and more. I was filming stuff, but back then it was just these old VHS tapes, and it doesn't look good at all. But I was practicing and practicing, and I had the idea, but I didn't do anything with it. I ended up preaching at this big church in Nashville. I was out in Oklahoma preaching. I preached here in Nashville for 3 years. I did the Amazing Grace Bible class show, and God just kept putting it on my heart, man. I'm telling you. And finally, He began to topple things that are here so that He could build up the platform here. And some when God topples things, it hurts. It's not fun what you
Yeah.
go through, and you're trying to figure out, why is this happening. But all the while, He's like, if you're not going to just go out on a leap of faith and do it yourself, let me just move you. And that's what He did. And He moved me into doing this, and having the opportunity to actually do it. And when I first started, the idea of spiritual outdoor adventures, we had actually tried a couple of tests on Amazing Grace Bible class, which aired on a lot of ABC syndicates on Sunday mornings. And it's typically a suit and tie show, and interviews with people and all that. Well, we went out and fly fished for an episode. And when I caught this trout on a fly, I said, now let's go back and let's cook this dude and eat him around the fire, and we'll talk about how Satan's like a fly fisherman. And he's trying to deceive you into hitting his hook and his bait. And so we did that one, and we got 5 times more response out of that particular episode than anything that had aired in 32 years on Amazing Grace Bible class. It was amazing. Now, about 20% of it was, how dare you use God's money to fish? But the other 80% was, my husband came walking through the room while you were doing it, sat down and watched the whole thing. I'm praying he wouldn't leave. And at the end, he said, now that's a good old boy. I could go to his church. So I knew we were onto something. So we tried Decoys of Deception, which was a turkey hunting episode, special on Amazing Grace. Same thing. And so I knew without a shadow of a doubt, this is what God wanted me to do. So I went to my eldership and said, hey, this is where we need to go with Amazing Grace. This is going to work. And they said, okay, put a budget together and a game plan and bring it to us, and we'll consider it. Well, at the time, I had no clue, Ben, that it was that I couldn't do one outdoor show per week and do 52 per year. That's crazy. There's absolutely no way. We do, it's all we can do to do 13
Yeah.
if you produce at the level that we produce. And of course, the animals aren't always going to be on script, nor are the fish, and it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of expense. But I did get my budget right. I told them, look, this is going to take about $2.4 million to do 52 episodes and buy the airtime and play them. And they were like, they just freaked out. You could see it in their eyes, and they said no, because they were still trying to pay the new building rendition off of $8 million. And so I just said, all right, I'm going to go do it myself. And I remember calling. I had met Michael by that point, and we had hunted together some, and also Jeff Fisher and the Duck Commander Phil Robertson and Bill Lee, who's now our governor, Mark Ezel with Purity Dairy. Those 5 guys right there got behind this idea and said, we'll support this. We'll help you get going. Let us know what we can do. And so we ran a Lee Company commercial and a Purity Dairy commercial. And I had Michael and Jeff on some episodes, and the Duck Man came and spoke to help us get it going. It's his first time to ever speak. He still blames me for getting him into public speaking. And I told him, man, Phil, you've been doing this for years. You just sit in your recliner with your bare feet, and 80 people are in your house, all these cages. Just stand on your feet and teach in some auditorium. So he did, and it was awesome. It was at TPAC, Tennessee Performing Arts Ceremony.
Wow. Yeah.
And so that's how we launched. And we could only get on the air on ABC Nashville. So we bought the time and only had enough money to pay for our airtime. And you know what? It took off. I'll never forget. The first show was called Bear Essentials. It was me and my son Jonathan, who at the time was 10, and I shot a bear in Canada off of a elevated stand with my son on the stand with me going, and I got him with a bow and arrow. And that aired on October Sunday night of 2022, right after Rudy Kalis Sports Center, and had a good lead in. And the next day, I'm driving to Arkansas with a singer named Marty Rowe. He was the lead singer for Diamond Rio. And he had just found out that Beautiful Mess by Diamond Rio just went #1. And he was all excited. And I got a phone call. And it was from the president of NBC Nashville affiliate station. And he said, where are you at? And I told him. He said, pull over. And I'm thinking, why do you want me to pull over? How does he know my wife's been in a wreck, or whatever, or my kids got hurt? And he said, just pull over. So I did. And he said, Jimmy, you won the ratings last night. He said, you beat out X-Files, ER, Adventures Incorporated, and The Tonight Show. And I'm like, what? And I started crying. I'll never forget it. And Marty's like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And so we were celebrating that. Well, that was the beginning. And from there, we ended up #2 in the ratings in the Nashville market that quarter. And I think the only one that beat us out was Tonight Show. And I knew we were onto something. And iLife called. That's Inspiration Network's dot channel. And they're like, we need to grow this thing. Can you help us put an outdoor block together? And I did. And I called Hank Parker and Jimmy Houston and Jay Al Linder, none of whom knew me. And I said, can you guys throw a Christian verse or something on the back of your old shows and let us have them just to air? I'll get you some free airtime on this little dot channel. And they said, sure. And so that's how I started a relationship with them. And here we go. This little bitty snowball is starting to roll. And 22 years later, it's now covering, 75% of the world. It's prime time. 2 of those 22 years, we beat out all 300 outdoor shows in ratings. And the crazy thing is, I walked into the SHOT Show, the big, huge shooting, hunting, outdoor trade show with 100,000 people at it. I walked into that in 2002 as a complete unknown. I mean, literally didn't know anybody. Nobody knew me. I got one tiny little sponsorship that was enough to cover the cost of that trip. And I went 3.5 years and didn't take a salary. And my wife supported us by teaching school. And by the year 2014, I almost don't even want to tell you this, but I have to. It's going to sound like I'm bragging, but trust me, 100%, I am not bragging, except I'm bragging on God. In 2014, I was named American Outdoor Sportsman of the Year. Now, how does that happen in 12 years? You see what I'm saying? God called me to do it. It's his plan. He has orchestrated every move. He has opened every door. We've, been full of sponsors. We had the biggest sponsorship year in year 22 than we've ever had. And most shows only last 2 years. And we have now produced 292 episodes. And so I say that again as a God story. They put me in the Hall of Fame in 18. Why? I mean, because of God. That's why. And so if anybody's hearing that going, oh, he thinks he's special, I know I'm not. If I start thinking it's about me and my head starts getting big, like, woo, I'm really something. Yeah, God will just say, I'm going to move you out. I'm going to put somebody else in now. because it's not about you, and it's not. So my board of directors helped me understand that years ago when I didn't want to put my name on the show. I just wanted it to be Spiritual Outdoor Adventures. And they said, no, it needs to be on the show, Spiritual Outdoor Adventures with Jimmy Sites. I fought it and I fought it. And they said, no, it's because sponsors are not sponsoring the show. They're sponsoring you.
Are you searching for financial wisdom rooted in timeless principles? Then look no further. Kirk Elliott Financial Wealth Advisor Firm is the best blend of biblical insights with expert financial guidance to navigate the stormy waters of an economic uncertainty. Kirk Elliott, renowned for his financial acumen, is your trusted guide through these turbulent times. With years of experience and a passion for biblical principles, Kirk brings clarity and purpose to every financial decision. Whether you're facing market fluctuation or seeking to align your wealth with your values, Kirk Elliott has the answers you need. No matter your background or experience, Kirk's approach is both approachable and effective. He'll help you understand how to protect your assets and make wise investments while staying true to your beliefs. When you go with Kirk Elliott, you can be confident that your finances are in capable hands. Just mention my name, Pastor Ben Graham, and they'll take care of you at his firm. Don't leave your financial future to chance. Tune in to the Kirk Elliott Financial Wealth Advisory Firm podcast and equip yourself with the tools to make informed decisions in today's unpredictable world. Embrace biblical finances and embark on a journey towards prosperity and financial peace of mind. Subscribe now to Real Talk with Pastor Ben Graham podcast and get ready to thrive amidst an economic uncertainty. Remember, when you go with Kirk Elliott, you're choosing financial wisdom rooted in biblical principles. Take the first step towards a brighter financial future today.
And so I voted no. They voted yes. It was 7-1. They put it on the show and it doubled immediately. And they knew what they were doing from a business perspective. So I get that. But that's the hardest part, Ben. The struggle is how do you go through this thing not feeling like a celebrity, but yet other people that watch the show look at you as one? How do you maneuver that? How do you walk that tightrope? And it's very difficult. And somebody put it like this: it's okay, Jimmy, for you to promote what you're doing to the point that maybe people will come to you to see you. Maybe they'll come to this speaking event to hear you because of you. But by the time they leave, if you've done your job, they have forgotten about you and they go home thinking about Jesus. So that right there is really ultimately the tightrope that you have to walk. And you, as a successful producer, now producing some big movies and things, you understand what I'm saying. People start thinking of you as, woo, look how good he is. But you're just Ben Graham, man. You're just God's servant. And God's using you, and you have a talent that he's given you. And if you don't use it, he'll take it away and give it to somebody else. So, you're living in that talent. Just don't ever let your head get big and think, man, I'm a really, you know what I'm saying? Because then I'm going to call you up and say, hey, let's go hunt. And I'll have a talk with you.
well, and the one thing is, no, absolutely. And the thing is true is, like, when I was younger, I think, a lot of what we wanted to do something big because we wanted to be known. But the older I get, the more I'm okay with people walking away just knowing who Christ is. I don't want to be elevated. Matter of fact, a lot of times there's more problems that come when you are quote unquote in a celebrity status. And I had somebody a while back, a couple of years ago, set me down, saw God was opening some doors and just said, are you sure you want to be known? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And because I'd live in the country and hunt and fish until the Lord come back or calls me home if I could. But, I think like you, he's put us here. We know what our purpose is to reach people with the gospel and to share the love of Christ. And, that's my passion. But I think, I found a way to do it, not just inside the church walls, but outside the church walls. And, when sometimes we had a movie that got pirated onto YouTube and the executive producer and I were talking, he's talking about it. I'm like, what are you going to do? And he goes, look at the thousands of comments that are coming in from places like Pakistan, other places where it says, I watched this and it changed my life. I gave my life to the Lord and all that. And he's like, this is worth more than money. And, and there are times where, you had a plan for a project to go this way, but God allowed it to go a different way. I'm not saying God's for stealing and cheating, but somehow it happened. And we didn't need more money for that project. We really wanted to reach people. And so I think it's awesome. Now I am praying before your show ends, and I hope it lasts for another 50 years or however long God allows you to do this, but I'm praying I get to be on an episode. And my prayer was like, or let me be a good enough hunter or fisher. I could be on Jimmy's show. But now I realize maybe this should be the episode that you do of what not to do. I think I could help you with that one. Like, you got buck master. I could do doe miner. You know what I mean? I could help you with
Yeah.
something.
Well, hey, what we'll have to do is punt on that one, and then we'll start a new fresh of downs, new set of downs. Here's why. In November of last year, 2022, God put on my heart, this will be your final season to film and produce Spiritual Outdoor Adventures. So season 22 aired last year, and we did not film anymore for that. And then I went through a period of time wondering, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? Write. I knew that. And so I'm working on 4 different writing projects, and working very diligently on one big hardback trade book that's going to come out in December of this year called Decoys of Deception. And it's based on this lesson that I've given at Wild Game Dinners for a long, long time now. And it's gonna really take on secular humanism and progressive Christianity movement and all these things that the Satan is using to kill us, basically, to defile and deceive and destroy us and desensitize us. So I'm working on that, working on another children's book. So I'm doing that. Well, then he made it very clear not too awfully long ago that we are to start a new production. And at first I'm like, oh, great, I just got out of it. But here's the difference. Spiritual Outdoor Adventures plus every other outdoor show on TV on any of the hunting channels, you're a level C producer. A tier 2 producer is you've got to do your lay, and then you've got so many commercials that you got to sell. So you're a marketing company so that you can try to at least break even. Okay. And so it's a really difficult thing. It doubles your workload. And the dream of an outdoor producer would be for someone to come along and say, here's a really big budget. Now go shoot 13 shows for us. Okay. That doesn't happen in outdoor television. Well, it's because of a very generous grant that's going to be most likely coming in. We are going to have a budget provided to start a new show, because this person, along with myself, feels like we need to reach the kids. And if we don't reach the kids in America and teach them about hunting and fishing, to get out away from these things, get off of these phones all the time, get outside, spend time in God's beautiful creation, and teach them how to hunt and fish and shoot bows and all that kind of stuff, we're going to lose hunting. We'll lose our privilege within 20 years in America. And the anti-hunters will have their way, even though they're less than 10% of the population. They will have their way. So we're very actively going after the kids for teaching them conservation and teaching them hunting and fishing. Now, also, I believe that if we don't reach the younger generation, that the church is in peril. Now, I don't think the church will ever go away. I think God's, will always protect the church, but it's going to be very weakened. We're going to see a church that's very much similar to what you see in Europe. It's going to be really a much less version of the church than what God intends for this world if we don't reach the next generation. And trust me, there are progressive Christians that are trying to tell this young generation right now, it's okay, you can live together, and there's really not a true hell. And hell is the guilt you feel for when you make a unwise decision. They don't call it sin, and they really have done away with atonement. There was really no need for Jesus down the cross, and that's just evil. That's pure evil. Those are wolves in sheep's clothing, and they're all over the church now. They're called progressive Christianity. They still call themselves Christians, and they're being led by there's people I can name, but I'm not going to. So look it up. We're going to take this on. We're taking on secular humanism, and we're going to provide this family-oriented, faith-based show for children and teenagers, and they're going to be the stars. I'm just going to host it, and it's called Dear Kids with Jimmy Sites. So there's a public announcement right there. Dear Kids, DEER, and then it's KIDZ, Dear Kids with Jimmy Sites. So we're already filming. We've already got 6 or 7 of them filmed, and it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be competition oriented. There will be winners, just like on, for example, American Idol or America's Got Talent. There's going to be big prizes. It's going to really attract kids, and of course we have our youth initiative with our books, and I do speaking for kids, and it's just, I'm so excited about it, and I don't have to go out and try to drum up a bunch of sponsors.
No,
so you need to get a kid
a
and bring that kid, and you and I will take that kid on a hunting or a fishing trip, and we'll make them the hero. All right.
I love it. Well, first off, my kids out hunt me now, but my kids have been following you. Of course, Jordan was involved in one of your film
Yeah.
camps years
Oh yeah.
ago, and got involved in filming for a long time. And my 15 and 13-year-old sons, Carson and Cooper, they do archery competition, and
Okay.
they've now they go out and hunt by themselves. And I mean, in our backyard, we were
Yep.
one day this year, and I got a log cabin home, live out in the country, kind of like you do, and you can hunt off our property. And one
Yep.
day Carson ran in, grabbed his bow. He said, "There's a big buck behind the house." So, and he's out barefooted on the back of the property, shot a doe a buck with his bow, and
Wow.
thing
That's
ran off
awesome.
10 yards. I mean, it was great, and
That's
we
so
all
cool.
watched it, so. But
Yep.
typically we're sitting in stands and things. But I mean, I love it. But what a need too. And also, I have on my list to get you in a film. We've talked about that. I got to
Mhm.
make that happen. But
Yeah, that's one of my bucket lists. I definitely want to do that. I played in a little B movie one time, just shooting pool in a pool hall with another guy, just background. That my daughter actually produced that one. But yeah,
well,
I've never done one of those.
when we do Chuck Norris's life story, I
Yeah.
know who to call.
Yeah.
I love it. I think you
Yeah.
could play him. So, where can folks go to follow you and get information about you?
Yep.
What's a good place for them to go to?
All right, we've actually got two main websites. First of all is just jimmysites.com. It's JIMMYSITES.com. Now that's my Bible study base camp. So I teach at Northfield University at our church, and I do deep dive historical backgrounds, textual Bible classes. So if you want to go there and do like Psalm 23, or if you want to do First John or First Peter or Genesis or whatever, you jump into there. It's a subscription website. We make it affordable for churches all over the world to be able to use it and print out with a license all of the study guides and the booklets, not have to buy anything. Very, very affordable, and it supports our ministry. We don't even break even with that. And so we have that available. And then we have the Spiritual Outdoor Adventure side. So here's the side of suit and tie, here's the side of camo. You'll literally see that picture. And the spiritualoutdooradventures.org is our website where you can watch about 50 or 60 of our spiritual outdoor adventure shows with the commercials taken out, and you can use those as curriculum. And so we've had myself and two other guys that have theological degrees on the doctorate level are writing the study guides, or have, and those are provided. They're 4 to 5 pages, and they're deep. We do not believe in having a devotional or Bible class where at the end you wipe milk off your lips. We want you to floss meat out of your teeth. And so these are good, solid studies. And you can find those on spiritualoutdooradventures.org. There's also some documentaries on there and some music videos, et cetera, that we've produced. We have a third website for kids. It's called IndianRockCave.com. And that's for my children's book that came out. And the next one's coming out this summer. And it's going to be a series of 7 books. And that's going to go in along with our youth initiative. So IndianRockCave.com is where you can get that book and just see a little bit of stuff there. Those are the main things. And then, of course, on social media and all that. Now, if you want to watch our show, we put it in syndication starting in January. And anywhere that CTN airs in the world, we're on it. So CTN is Christian Television Network. And when you go to spiritualoutdooradventures.org, just click on the little air schedule, and you'll see everywhere in the world that you can find a CTN, whether it's satellite, whether it's one of their 24 broadcast stations, whether it's their online delivery, whether it's their overseas. We're covering even China and Pakistan and Africa. So we're airing a fresh, refurbished episode every week for 52 weeks this year. So we've gone back and we're airing seasons 11 through 14. And that's some of the best seasons that we ever produced. They're amazing. A lot of star power in those episodes. This week's episode has Ricky Skaggs in it. Last week was John Carter Cash, who just won a Grammy 2 nights ago. So a lot of those kind of people, Michael W., they're all involved in these episodes. And we're always talking about faith, but we're out doing some kind of crazy fun adventure, whether it's in New Zealand or wherever it is. And so those can be watched pretty much anywhere you are. If you have a phone, you get them. Also, you can get them online on huntchannel.tv. I think 6 times a week live. They are on those. So there's no excuse for anybody that wants to watch it that said, well, I can't find it. Just go to our website at spiritualoutdooradventures.org. You'll find that air map. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for being on today. And
absolutely.
I sit here, I listen. It's funny because there's so many similarities, and I've I mean, actually, you could claim I was copying you, but sometimes I didn't realize I was copying you. But from songwriting, which I never did until I moved here and I started doing
Yep.
songwriting sessions, and
Right.
even I wrote a song that made it into a movie that we did, which
Wow.
is
How
I was
cool.
so excited about. They put it in the opening credits, but
Yeah.
from songwriting to to studies, and I have a new book coming out here in about 2 weeks called Apathy and Ignorance, Two of America's Deadliest Sins. And we really talk about how we went from a Judeo-Christian nation to a
Yeah.
secular nation, and how we've removed God. And I think it's a little similar to what you're bringing out. And I love what you're doing with reaching this next generation. I think that's so important. The Bible says, in talking about the nation of Israel, there was a generation that knew not the Lord or the works that he had done.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing that happen in our
Yes.
nation if we don't do
Sad.
something to reach this next generation. So thank you for being
Yeah.
on. Thank you for what you're doing. And man, just excited to hear all that God's doing in your life, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Well, it's an honor to be with you, Ben. You're one of my heroes. I always look up to you, and I love to see what you're doing. And I loved your last movie that Joey played in and Michael played in. It was fan. I don't know if it's your last one, but that was a great movie. That one
Well,
really got me crying, man. And I was telling all my kids about it. You got to watch this movie. So you keep doing what you're doing, and just make everything you do missional. That's what I'm trying to do, and we'll encourage each other to continue to do that.
well, thank you so much. And I do need to ask, were you crying because the movie moved you, or were you crying because you saw me with a mustache? Because that's a pretty tough look.
No, I was laughing at that one. No, just kidding. No, you did a good job at it. You always do. But that was a
I,
great movie. The message was so strong. Man, it was like you can't watch that movie and not get the message of God's grace, you know?
I think if I remember
Oh,
correctly, you sent a picture because you watched that with your mama, didn't you?
I did. And my mother
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. Yes. It was a really
Was
special time. Yeah.
Well, that meant the world to me. When you told me that she, I guess, gave it two thumbs up or whatever,
Oh
that,
yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
that meant the world to me. Well, thank you, brother. God
Yeah.
bless you. Hey, I want to thank our sponsors, Old US Outdoor. Listen, I love the products that they have. I also love that it's a veteran-owned company, and most importantly, it's my son's company. I want you to go to their website, check them out. You'll not be disappointed with the apparel and the special gift that you get in every package that they send out. Old US Outdoor. Hey guys, thank you for being with us today. I told you this was going to be good, man. I always enjoy my time with Jimmy, and he's such a blessing and encourager. The only thing I don't like when I talk to him is I do get a little jealous. I'm just going to admit it. All that hair he's got, it's just so pretty and nice up there. Maybe one day we get to heaven, I'll have hair like that. That's all I can pray for. But I love Jimmy. He's such an encouragement. And I hope you'll go to his website, check out his stuff. They've got some great Bible studies on there, and you got to watch his episodes. There is a bunch of them. I think he said right now, episode or season 11 through 18 is up, and there's just some great episodes. So check that out. And again, thank you for being here with us today. Go to our website, pastorbengraham.com, and you can find our social media on there. Be sure to follow us and like us. And we look forward to the next time we're with you. God bless you and have a great day.